Without further ado, I want to introduce our distinguished guest, Dr. Hassan A. Tetteh. Dr. Tetteh is a retired U.S. Navy captain and associate professor of surgery at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences and adjunct faculty at Howard University College of Medicine. He was selected as an emerging leader in health and medicine scholar by the National Academy of Medicine. He served on the Strategic Planning Committee for the National Academy of Medicine Strategic Plan from 2024 to 2028. He's currently a partner and vice president for operations for Vituity and thoracic surgeon for Innova Health and Howard University Hospital. He has over 25 years of dedicated military service to our country and global deployments, and his experience as a combat trauma surgeon is unparalleled. So he led enterprise initiatives in his roles as health policy advisor, director of futures and innovation at the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, command surgeon for the National Defense University, chief medical informatics officer for the Navy, and warfighter health mission chief at the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. There is so much to speak of. He's an AI strategist, as I mentioned. He is also a native of Brooklyn, New York, a graduate of Brooklyn Technical High School. So we should give it up for one of our very own. He was also received his Bachelor of Sciences from the State University of New York at Plattsburgh, his MD from SUNY Downstate Medical Center, his MPA from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and an MBA from Johns Hopkins University Carey Business School, and a Master of Sciences in National Security Strategy with a concentration in artificial intelligence from the National War College. I could go on and on, but you didn't come here to jeer me. I'd like to introduce to you the author of Smarter Healthcare with AI, Harnessing Military Medicine to Revolutionize Healthcare for Everyone Everywhere, Dr. Hassan A. Tetteh.
Kenneth, thank you so much for that introduction, which was way too verbose. He missed out the most important things, and I warned him, and I should have shared with him that the only three things he had to mention for my introduction is that I am a father, a husband, and a surgeon.
That was three. I could not have said that any better, and I'm not at all surprised that you would summarize your extensive, impressive resume thusly, because really at the heart of your approach to this tremendous technology, I think, which is remarkable, is the human-centered nature of it. And that's what comes out in this book. So I want to just open up kind of big picture and ask for you to give us a little bit of the story of Hassan A. Tetteh from Brooklyn. Where did you start? What's your backstory? What got you into medicine, into the military, and what kind of opened your eyes towards the world of artificial intelligence?
Well, how much time do we have? That reminds me of a request I had from a colleague of mine a few weeks ago. I was asked to give an invocation, which I'd never given before, at a ceremony. And of course, you know, it's the beginning of an event that is already packed with a full agenda. And I said, how much time do I have? And you know what he said? He said, well, let the spirit move you. So I'll leave it. The spirit were to move me. I think what I would say for the backstory is it really does start at as humble beginnings just across the river here in a little village town called Brooklyn. Now, it's a different kind of Brooklyn than the Brooklyn that probably exists today, because I grew up in a neighborhood called Brownsville and East Flatbush. We used to call it the affectionate 90s by that time because it was where the 90s sort of streets were. I did go to Brooklyn Tech, and I was made in the USA, but I had West African immigrant parents. So I think you could relate to that.
I definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Now, you know, if you have immigrant parents, there's only two options for your life.
We didn't practice this.
There's being a doctor, and if you don't like blood, then you're got to be a lawyer.
I'm a lawyer.
There you go. So I think I actually wanted to do something different. In fact, I did. I wanted to be an artist. In fact, I was a very good graffiti artist, as a matter of fact. I got into art and design high school. So for those of you that know about how prestigious that school is, and I was very proud of that. And I went to my dad and I said, I got into art and design high school and I'm going to hang out with all my friends that were graffiti artists and be an artist. And my immigrant dad looked at me and he said, no, you're not. Said, because artists don't make any money. So instead, I had to go to science and engineering school. I went to Brooklyn Tech, which was a great fortune for me. It was an excellent school, excellent education, great peers. I did not have the greatest college advice, so my college experience was a little bit wayward, but it worked out. I wound up going to a state school, as you mentioned, upstate Plattsburgh. That is where I actually learned about Harvard. So, interestingly enough, if I hadn't gone to Plattsburgh, I may not have gone to Harvard. But just to kind of bring us to the present day, because I could go on, your question is a really good one, and I think it really will give everyone here perspective on how did I come to learn about and talk about and write a book about AI. Well, when I was in high school, I used to travel up to the City College of New York to engage in a program called the Bridge to Medicine program. It was an excellent program. It was to help kids that wanted to become doctors get college exposure courses. And while I was there, I met some individuals that were drilling in front of the plaza there, and they looked really good. They were dressed in fatigues, and they were really sharp, and they were very disciplined and marching around. I was just absolutely fascinated with that. And they turned out to be the junior ROTC Harlem Youth Marine Corps. And I joined them. I got involved in it, and I was going to join the Marines after high school. I was 17 years old when I graduated, and my mom was going to sign off for me. At the very last minute, I changed my mind. So I go to college, I go to med school, and after med school, there were some recruiters, and I ran into a Navy recruiter, and she asked me if I'd ever considered joining the Marines or the Navy or anything. And I said, yeah, actually, I was going to join the Marines. They said, well, if you join the Navy, after you finish with medical school, we'll pay you as a resident, which was a great thing because, it costs a lot of money to live in New York, believe it or not. And on a resident salary, not too good. So they dangled a carrot. It sounded really intriguing. And I said, yeah, I could do 4 years. And 25 years later, I was still in the Navy.
How about that? Yeah, that's an awesome start. And I should say as well, we do have, I think, some members from our special interest group veterans. I don't know if there are any who are in the room this evening. Could you put your hand up if you are a member of that special interest group? Well, we definitely have a special interest group here, and just want to thank you on behalf of the Harvard Club for your tremendous service to our.
Wow. I should say this is really important. I think it characterizes, I think, can frame our discussion in many ways. People, many of my friends always wondered, why you join the Navy? Like, why the military? And, I have evolved my opinion, obviously my attitude about the military service has done tremendous things for me. It's made me the person that I am. But more importantly, our military has made the United States what it is. And when people say thank you for your service, I think it's just a euphemism. Everyone just kind of says it. But for me, I really internalized that because I know what my parents, who are both deceased now, what it meant for them to be in America, because it was a land of opportunity. And make no mistake about it, and this is how I think we should characterize it. I'll just do it now. Let's characterize what this discussion about AI is. My coming into AI's, sort of the work here and strategy, the understanding and my appreciation for what this technology is, came from a national security lens and posture, not necessarily from healthcare. I'll tell you the specifics about that. But the reason why our country is the way it is in the world order of things is, for many reasons, obviously the people. But from a historical context, something enormously important happened at the end of World War II that really led to the end of World War II. We dropped the bomb. America did. And unleashed an awesome technology that never before had been seen. Many people were working on it, but they hadn't seen that power. And for the next 8 decades, essentially, the the United States got to write the script on the world order of how things were going to be. So make no mistake, yes, we're very diplomatic. We can have our economic power. But when the United States goes into the room, the reason why we have that gravitas is because 80 years ago, they dropped the bomb. And that power was so awesome that everyone said, we better listen to these folks. We'll do what you say. Well, AI is our moment right now. AI is that power that if it's unleashed and wielded in the right way, hopefully, then we can continue to have this sort of leadership in this world order. But if it were to be ceded to someone else or another country, our world order would be potentially not the way it is right now. And so we are not necessarily in an arms race, but we're in a different kind of race now. And I think it's really important for people to characterize the context of the life in the world that we're living in. Because I know there's lots of folks that are fearful of AI and they have anxiety and they have concerns, and that is absolutely appropriate. There are many reasons to have concerns for that. But I always want to make sure that I set the table for where my perspective of how I came to understand this technology and appreciate it comes from. It came from a national security lens. It came from being the only doctor at the National War College when you listed all those things that I've done, which, by the way, you should not be impressed by, because every one of those accomplishments that he's listed so enthusiastically, in my mind, I just think to myself, oh my gosh, there are like 50 failures for each one of those successes. So that's why I think you should just say father, husband, and surgeon. That way I can can concentrate on just those things. But that's the perspective that I kind of bring this discussion, what I want to share with you in terms of how we talk about AI. Think about it not necessarily in the healthcare context, in society's context, but just in our global context, because it's that's really what's happening in the world right now.
That's really important perspective. And I'm going to brag on you a little bit more. Father, husband, a doctor, and Ironman competitor. He just completed Ironman on Saturday. I didn't beat glad I did. But to drill down a little bit, taking this to healthcare. So your book is entitled Smarter Healthcare with AI, and kind of take it to healthcare from the national security perspective. What exactly does this mean? It doesn't mean more digital necessarily or more data-driven, or does it? Could you set the stage for why this really matters in this industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So you shared in the beginning what my discipline is. So I'm a surgeon, but I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, and specifically my focus has been on heart and lung transplant. That's kind of really what I did. We didn't really do a lot of heart and lung transplant in the military. Actually, we don't do any of it. So I had the fortune of working outside of the military to sort of fulfill that great interest that I had. But when I went to the National War College and throughout my career, I've always been very dedicated to trying to do my best to help my patients. And I also recognize that we are, just in the matter of time that we've sat here, there's new papers and new innovation and new publications that have come out that I had no idea about. And it dawned on me when I was serving as command surgeon that people would come to me with all kinds of questions. This was at the National Defense University. And I'll never forget, it was an afternoon, and I was all by myself in my office, and this colonel came walking in, and he's a very fit guy. You know, he talked about marathons. He was, ultra marathoner, really fit. Had a twin brother who had a heart condition and actually, had a pretty bad outcome. And he was very concerned because as a twin, he's thinking, oh my gosh, whatever happened to him could probably happen to me, even though I'm fit. And he asked me, he said, so sometimes I get this, sometimes I have a headache, sometimes I have all of these random things. And he's telling me all of that. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what this person has. I don't know. And I was really frustrated by it because I thought to myself, there's probably some obscure paper somewhere or someone has described this person's condition and there's an answer for it. But because I just don't have access or the ability to synthesize all of the available information based on all of the things that he's telling me to come up with an answer for him, I just felt so inept. I wasn't smart enough to come up with the answer that he was looking for, but the question he asked. So around that time, I think my colleague is in here, I was invited to speak at my alma mater to the white coat ceremony, and which is a great honor, usually reserved for much older people with a lot more distinguished hair and beard and gravitas, but somehow they made a mistake. They invited me, and I had to sort of figure out how I was going to inspire these newly minted medical students that are going to enter our great profession. So I did my best. I talked about the art of human care, something that I feel passionate about, and tried to inspire them. And afterward, a parent came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm a freelance journalist at a Wall Street Journal." And I was like, I'm sure you are. In my mind, I didn't say that to a person. But anyway, we engaged in a bunch of exchanges, and fast forward, he got back with me after, running some of this through our public affairs folks and so forth. And he said, "Hey, my editor is going to publish your story in the Wall Street Journal as an opinion piece." And I said, "Really? Is that really going to happen?" And he said, "Yeah, it is." I'm like, "Wow." And the title of that was called Smarter Healthcare with AI. The title of the book was adapted from the title of the Wall Street Journal article, which was called How AI Can Make Your Doctor Smarter. Yes. And so when Forbes approached me to write this book, they had read that Wall Street Journal article and said, "Hey, what about Smarter Healthcare with AI, the title?" And then I added the title, a subtitle of Harnessing Military Medicine to Revolutionize Healthcare for Everyone Everywhere.
That's a wonderful genesis. I should mention to everyone who walked in that there are a few stacks of this amazing book which I read. It's beautifully written, I have to say, and I know you wrote it. This was not a ghost written book. This is a beautifully, eloquently written book about a very complex issue. A big thing that I have a reputation for at these events is make sure that the people who come out have an opportunity to purchase the book. So I hope that everyone here will stop by the table there and say hello to Josh. He has copies of the book, and Dr. Tetteh, will you be gracious enough to stay? I have 5 copies. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And you should also thank Alan Riff, because he's the one that wrote the story, and it was just amazing. And that was a very special thing that happened in my career. But you said, well, how come Smarter Healthcare with AI? Well, it was after that conversation that I had with my colleague, of him asking me this question and me feeling frustration that I couldn't answer it, because I know it was really troubling him, that he was a healthy person who was genuinely concerned, and I didn't have the answers for him. And as I was in the National Defense University's community, exposed to national security experts, listening to and having conversations with and debating and having seminars with people from the intelligence community, I learned of how they were using artificial intelligence to synthesize information, analyze data, multimodal data, pictures, images, satellite images, chatter, whatever, and glean insight from that to make better decisions. And in my mind, my epiphany was like, this is healthcare all day long. And that was why I decided to pitch to the powers that be when I was a student at National War College, and found some mentors to support me, the concept of writing a thesis, which was called AI in Military Medicine, the Strategic Application of the Technology of War Horror.
So speaking of that, I know people came here to kind of get some insights from an expert. In your book, you provide several examples of AI and how it's improved healthcare, and as the potential to improve healthcare. You speak about its role in preventing surgical infections, improving vaccines, blood banks or transfusions. I didn't know until reading your book, the second leading cause of death in the U.S. military is suicide. There are applications in suicide prevention from AI. Can you walk us through the role, the application of AI in a couple of these contexts. I'm particularly interested in the suicide prevention.
Sure, absolutely. And before I give you those answers, I just want to set the table for how I even got to be in a position to write intelligently about these examples. And it was, again, being at the right place at the right time. When you go to War College, and we have an Army War College, a National War College, an Air Force War College, a Navy War College, you write papers, and these papers get archived. And many of our leaders in the Pentagon read the papers because you have senior officers that have some time and space and resources to think about very difficult topics, and they write strategy papers like we did. I was fortunate that the year I graduated from the National War College in 2018, that same year was the year that through a number of executive orders at the Pentagon, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center was established. My first assignment after I graduated from school there was to go back to Navy Medicine headquarters, and I was the chief medical informatics officer. So it was supposed to be a 3-year tour. Someone read my paper and said, "We want Dr. Tetteh to come to the Pentagon," which was like, wow, what a role. And that was because the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center was charged with propagating and advancing AI technologies across the department. Now, think about that. Go back in time. This is 2018, 2019. No ChatGPT yet. So our hardest job, believe it or not, Kev, was to convince people in the Pentagon that AI was a really important topic that they need to pay attention to. We need to develop strategies for this thing. Interesting. Now, we were resourced, courtesy of your taxpayer dollars, with a few $billions, and we were out there putting products and projects and initiatives in place. And when I came on board, I was in charge of leading the Warfighter Health Mission portfolio. We had identified areas where we realized there was potential for AI to make a big difference in areas like logistics, medical records, and imaging, and suicide prevention, and also human performance enhancement. Just thinking about all the myriad of data and opportunities we could leverage this information to sort of help our warfighters. And fortunately, being a pupil of history, I realized that the military, believe it or not, has always been the vanguard for bringing technologies into the mainstream of civilian healthcare. Many people don't know that. It was Washington's Army, Continental Army, that came up with the concept of inoculating the people that were fighting in the Revolutionary War with smallpox. Smallpox was devastating the British. It was also devastating the Revolutionary Army, but Washington at a very young age was exposed to smallpox, so he knew how devastating it could be. So they didn't have vaccines back then, but they had a process called variolation where they would make a little pustule and kind of inoculate people with a little small amount of smallpox so they'd get immunity to it. That was the beginning of the vaccine program in the military. Now, I know vaccines are controversial now, but in the military, you just line up whenever you're going somewhere, and they just jab you in the arm. You ask no questions, you just say, yes, sir, and just keep moving. And that happened to me in my 25 years. So it's pretty interesting that there's controversy for that. But that was the military. Antisepsis, the British surgeon Lister was the one who very, very early on said, listen, you guys that are surgeons are infecting people because you're going into autopsies and dissecting dead bodies, and you're wiping your hands on your pants, and you're rolling up your sleeves. These are why surgeon sleeves are called surgeon sleeves, because they didn't want to get their clothes soiled. So they just rolled up their sleeves, didn't wash their hands, and then went and treated other patients. And they were passing infections. So Lister, the beginning of the godfather of antisepsis, was saying you had to wash your hands. Ken, it took 30 years before people caught on to that and said, hey, that's a good idea. Military doctor, British, but military doctor. Now, the first documented blood transfusion happened in the Civil War after an amputation. And it was the Army from that experience that started to bank blood. Can you imagine if there was no bank blood in the civilian world? Like for cancer patients, for trauma patients. So the military has always been the vanguard. The military was the first to come up with electronic health records. And we got left behind by the big Cernas and Epics and other companies, but we're the first. So here you are, you think about me and think you couldn't me in this position of like, wow, I am at this incredible organization surrounded by brilliant AI scientists, data scientists, computer scientists, leadership, and we're capitalized with resources to bring about solutions that will absolutely help people at the point of care, warfighters and those that are taking care of warfighters. And I was able to recruit an incredible, talented team, which I write about in the book, and I share the stories of how all those people came to be and talk about the projects that we worked on. And we had dozens and dozens of projects, but I highlight a couple because they were actually implemented at scale and at enterprise level. And to think about it, at the time, I realized we were witness to history in the making. You think about a bureaucratic organization like the Pentagon, with all of the politics and all of the regulations and all of the ethical issues that we had to navigate to be able to bring something like an augmented reality microscope to existence and for it to be deployed into a hospital environment. An augmented reality microscope was the genesis of a project that took slides, pathology slides, digitized those, using computer vision to build models, and then an interface with this really special microscope, so that when we looked inside the microscope, rings would get drawn around abnormal cells. Well, think about that. It's almost like magic. And we were working on that. That was just one example. For suicide, you mentioned that. Devastated. I know people all throughout my career in medical school, internship, residency, fellowship that had taken their lives. In the military, again, many examples, dear friends, incredibly complicated problem and challenge. In the military, when someone commits suicide, it is investigated, it is thoroughly studied, and there's a report that's generated. Only organization that really does that. So if you think about the civilian sector, someone commits suicide, for the most part, the authority will just make sure it was a foul play and that's it. There's no real analysis done. But in the military, each one of these tragic events generates hundreds of pages of a report. We look at social media, we look at their service record, we look at their health record, we look at their finance, their relationships, all of these different things, and it becomes a report. So think about it. We were sitting on this information. These were not people that attempted. These were people that were successful in the act.
Took their own lives.
Took their own lives, devastated. And we realized that there could be incredible information out of that. But how could one individual read that? Now we started to use natural language processing to go through that. And we built an incredible team of professional behavioral health individuals, experts in their field from the best universities, even Harvard. And we brought them all together and we were working on developing an ontology so that we could start to see patterns that would be helpful to recognize behaviors that would be at high risk for people that were likely to conduct and be involved in self-harm behaviors. That was the beginning of a project that was called Orion, and things are still going on to this day. We had a project on using drones to deliver blood. Very practical. I know this because I was in the tent taking care of blown up Marines, and we had a walking blood bank.
In combat.
In combat. And what a walking blood bank is, for whether those of you may not know, you think about we're in a tent in the middle of nowhere, not refrigeration, not really a lot of electricity, working on generators, is that if someone came in, everyone on the base knew what their blood type was. So when a patient came in, we'd quickly match their blood, and anyone that was O blood type would come to the tent. The walking blood bank, they would come I would come in and you'd sit there and we'd start taking blood from you and giving it directly into the injured. So when we have a drone as a logistic, apparatus, that was one of our solutions that we were looking into potentially applying in our combat spaces. And there was many more. And I would encourage you to read the book because they're really fascinating, great stories about how we brought these things into evolution and into existence, and also applied them, in a practical way that actually helped to save lives and impact people's well-being.
That's wonderful, and I those examples in the book are quite profound and well described in plain language. Very complicated processes, which I'm sure you underwent, but really well described, bringing to life what you're looking at on the battlefield. Now, one thing I want to do, I'm assuming that some of you might have some questions. We want to always preserve some time at the end for you to pose some questions to our experts. And Dr. Tetteh would be best positioned to address them. I can't imagine another person I'd be sitting to and asking these questions to. So please, if you can, as he's talking, think about some questions that you might have. Last 10 minutes, we'll make sure that you get to ask them. I want to turn a little bit to technology of AI and to dig into the notion that comes with this technology of equity and trust. Some of the human factors that you really draw out. I know, in addition to your technical prowess, one of the things that as you read the different people who commented and who gave blurbs to your book, they speak about your exceptional bedside manner, your compassion, your ability to connect with the humanity of your patients, and how that is really unique. In fact, chapter 1, you're referred to as a unicorn in that regard. So the book, it really does emphasize the importance of ethical AI, right? And so the notion of data diversity is something that comes up constantly in conversations around AI, and particularly in the medical field. So first of all, can you just tell us, why is data diversity important? And then second, in your experience, what do you think are the biggest challenges to ensuring that the data is diverse and representative so that it can really impact the healthcare system in the right way?
Yeah, very, very good questions. Excellent questions. I will say something about the humanity and the empathy and the things that you highlighted. I shared with the medical students during a white coat ceremony this concept of the art of human care, where that comes from. I was either fortunate or unfortunate, if you will, to have a very near-death experience when I was young. I was actually an undergrad. I had bacterial meningitis and I almost died. And for any of you that have actually really been a patient and not in the ER with a sprained ankle or with a hangnail or going to see your doctor for a routine checkup, but I mean like in the ICU with a tube in every orifice of your body, knocked out, unconscious in that embarrassing gown and scared to death that you're going to die, then you'll appreciate what it's like to be a patient. And I've had that happen to me. And so that has shaped my perspective well before I became a doctor. And I think that experience and that exposure to that feeling is where, the human care or this, desire, and I think this pragmatism, and more importantly, this commitment to really trying to meet patients where they are comes from. So I just want to set the table for that. But if you think about the question you just asked about data diversity and AI, one of the things that we didn't do yet, but I want to do it now, is to sort of lay a definition for what AI is. And I'm going to use my definition. Hopefully it will encompass everyone's definition here, because I know if I asked each individual person here to describe AI, you'll give me some definition, and everyone's definition will be different. So for the purpose of this question and answering it in the way that you asked, I want to define AI in the following way. AI is a machine mimicking human behavior being mimicked by a machine. And hopefully under that umbrella, it can encompass a lot of things, right? There was a time when a washing machine was considered an AI because it was mimicking human behavior. And we have now chat where, people have actually now had ability to have a tangible experience with AI, because prior to ChatGPT, for the most part, unless you were a computer scientist or really into this stuff, you really had no real connection to AI. And as it was amusing to me where people said, no, I never use AI. And then they'd look at their iPhone and it opens up and they're like, realizing that that's computer vision that's doing that. Right. But this concept of data diversity, if you look at how AI has evolved over the years, and you look at something that is pretty widely commonly described right now, which is called the AI ladder. It has like 15 stages of AI. In the very beginning, stage 1 was data. And if you're a computer scientist or a programmer, you know that data is the most important thing, because you need data to build models and to train and to get feedback and to get the loops and to build what we now call, large language models and things like that. So data really is a foundational, fundamental, first important thing. So anyone that thinks about, garbage in, garbage out, thinking you have bad data and you have unstructured data and you have data that's inaccurate, whatever model you build on that foundation is going to be flawed. So that's why data diversity is important. That's why data fidelity is important. That's why these 5 V's of data is important. You make air volume, veracity, all of these things, these concepts around this very fundamental, foundational aspect of what AI is, begins with data. And so if that data is flawed, if that data is biased, if that data is incorrect or inaccurate, then whatever you're going to build on top of that foundation is going to be flawed. And so when you think about healthcare where the stakes are high, it's one thing if you're, looking at an algorithm and you're determining whether or not you should watch something on Netflix because you get served up this, offer of like, hey, you would like this movie. Well, if that's a mistake, there's not really a large consequence there. But in healthcare, the stakes are a little bit higher, right? If someone is served up the recommendation for taking a drug that's inaccurate or doesn't take into account that someone has an allergy or a bad reaction to something, that could be a problem. That's why this data is very important. One of the things that's been fascinating to me, and we learned this very early on, when you think about AI in healthcare, is that there are many people right now that are deploying AI solutions in healthcare. They're doing it in large organizations, they're doing it in clinics, they're doing it in different practices. And some of them are doing it without a governance structure. What do I mean by that? A governance structure, which is very important, is, in my mind, foundationally the first thing you should do before you do anything in healthcare with AI. Having a rogue person going out and just deploying things and worse, using it on patients without a governance structure is a recipe for huge liability and potential harm to patients. One of my colleagues was at a symposium, and I've been fortunate to speak around the country now with lots of different, people that are doing this work and doing it well, and learning from it and also sharing what their experiences are. And Tom Osborne was one of the speakers who was on at a summit with me. He said something which I think this is the right generation for what I'm going to say. You'll appreciate this. He said that, how many of you know who Mary Andrade is? Okay, all right, that's good person. If you're in a younger audience, they have no idea who that is. So think Speed. He's a famous race car driver, right? And he says, he used this, and it encapsulates it so perfectly. He said, why can Mario Andrade go fast? I'll pose that to you all. Why can Mario Andrade go fast?
10,000 hours of practice.
That's part of it.
He knows how to navigate. Heck of a machine.
Heck of a machine. He knows how to navigate. Let me make it even more clear. Why can you all go fast in your cars?
Those are the cars. Feel safe.
The motor.
Because you have brakes. Think about it. If you didn't have brakes, you think you would go fast in a car?
Very careful.
Well, you'd be very careful. So Mario Andrade can go fast because he has brakes. You know what AI governance does? It gives you brakes. It allows you to stop something because you have the structures in place. You put the data in a infrastructure and you set things up. You have people that can check and balance what is being deployed. And you have a structure in place that can absolutely shut something down if something goes wrong.
Can I ask you a quick question? Yes. Because we're going to have 10 minutes for everyone to ask you some questions. But I want to ask you, what are the consequences of not having brakes? I think there are a lot of innovators, and there, just by show of hands, are there any folks who are kind of part of the innovation community as entrepreneurs or biotech? So wonderful. So one of the kind of the pathos of many innovators is kind of run fast, break stuff, right? And learn, iterate, break some more stuff, figure out how to do it better, keep moving. What are the implications of taking that approach, that industry approach, to something as critical as healthcare?
Well, like I said, the stakes are higher. And you do that in a video game, that's fine, no big deal. Do it even in a self-driving car, as long as, you're wearing a seatbelt, maybe that won't be that bad. But in healthcare could be very devastating and consequential. And so governance in healthcare is very important because there are so many complicated factors that go into healthcare for the care of the patient, that when you have a governance structure, you do things that give you the ability to actually deploy something that's sustainable, something that is enterprise-wide. And we learn that through trial and error. For instance, I'll give you a practical example of why I say governance is important. We were in the middle of implementing, and I know in the interest of time, we're in the middle of implementing a new electronic health record when I sort of took the job, transitioning from chief medical informatics officer to the JAKE. And as we were getting, these great innovators coming to us with solution after solution and these, shiny things and these great models and this great tool, and we were thinking about how do we deliver this to everyone in the enterprise, we immediately recognized that our actual electronic health record did not have the appropriate architecture. There wasn't a way for us to access the data so that we could build models on that. That was a flaw, not because of the system or the electronic health record, but it was because the design and the future thinking of how are we going to put something and scale in enterprise-wide hadn't even been considered. So by our action of trying to innovate, we realized we have to go back to the drawing board and talk to our folks that were implementing this new electronic health record and say, wait a minute, you guys are configuring this entirely wrong because you are not future-proofing this. You're actually hindering us. We won't be able to do the things that are going to happen in the future. That led to an entirely reconfiguration of our entire architecture. That now gives us the ability to do things at enterprise level, develop sandboxes and do everything that we can so we can do development, test it, and then put it into production. Had we not done that, and that's really an ongoing project right now, governance is one of the biggest initiatives happening right now in the military health system. And I would argue if you look at the systems, the health systems in the civilian sector that are doing that right now, they are beginning with an AI governance structure where you bring ethicists, where you bring clinicians, where you bring technologists, where you bring the people from finance that are going to make these investments. You bring everybody together. It takes longer, but guess what? If you put that in place, then you can go fast. You can go really fast.
So the guardrails, the brakes, orientation, then velocity. Absolutely. I love that. We want to preserve some time for those of you who have questions to ask questions of Dr. Tetteh. So please put your hand up high if you do have a question. I see one all the way in the back already, and we will make sure to get to them. Please, if you can, ask your questions succinctly so we can get as many questions in as possible. And I'm certain I'm actually volunteering after you're done, as you're signing books, that folks who did get a chance to ask their questions can ask them to Dr. Tetteh at the back table there. So I saw one hand in the back, and I'm going to get the microphone. I'm going to date myself if anybody remembers Jerry Springer. the late, great Jerry Springer. Let me go up there. So I will bring the microphone up to the middle here. Thank you. And you can ask your question to Dr. Tetteh.
Yes. The Department of Defense is now labeled the War Department. Russia is, to the extent it has an economy, is on a war footing. China is moving more toward that. To what extent do you see our economy shifting that, especially with the attempted destruction of funding of key medical research and the control of the universities?
Yeah, very good question. So clearly not speaking on behalf of the Department of War and Department of Defense any longer, but you're asking kind of two separate questions, but at least the way I'm interpreting it, and I'll try and address it. The first part of what are my thoughts on the posture of Russia and China with respect to vis-a-vis the
Now, first in the U.S.
U.S. Okay. Yeah. I believe, like I said before, when I set the table, and our race right now across the globe is who is going to lead in AI development and controlling it, if there is such a thing with this type of technology. I think that's going to be the race of the future right now in the next 3 to 5 years and beyond. Right now, I think America has a pretty good lead for a number of reasons: technology, our chips, the data, and I just think our spirit in the way that we innovate has some advantages over some of the other places that you mentioned. With respect to healthcare now, there are some challenges as well as opportunities there. Yes, we have had a degradation in some of the research, but if you think about the research that's done in AI in particular, it's actually not done at the major medical centers right now because, one, we don't have access to the data. Two, we don't have the technology, and quite frankly, they don't have the expertise. How do I know this? Because when I was at the Pentagon, I got to see the people that had the data, the people that had the expertise, and the people that had the resources. And it wasn't the folks in healthcare. It was in industry. The largest papers, the most consequential papers in AI, whether it be in healthcare and science or in energy or in finance, they'd come from industry. It was Google that wrote the Transformer paper in 2017, which was the basis in the beginning for what began the large language models that we now call ChatGPT. So yes, there is concern, and there's definitely going to have to be reconfiguration and a sort of rethinking of how research, particularly in AI and healthcare, gets done moving into the future. I believe it's going to be a collaboration between industry and the major healthcare systems, because the data's in the healthcare system, but getting that and harnessing it and then making it meaningful in terms of research and getting insight from it is going to take a collaboration that can't really be done, I think, in a compartmentalized way.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have room. We have time for one more question. Let's go for.
I'll make a short answer.
Yeah, let's go for two more. Okay, please approach the microphone.
First technical question. I understand the VA health records are largely unstructured, whereas a lot of the other systems have used structured records. And I just heard an AI expert say the unstructured records are better for use in AI. Is the future health record system likely to be more like the unstructured VA record?
This is a good question. And you're right to some extent about the unstructured nature of the VA system's data. The great thing, though, is that many of the models that are being developed right now can learn from unstructured data, multimodal unstructured data. What does that mean? Voice, vision, pictures, video. So we don't need it to be structured. You don't need it to be in the format that it was before. And that's why, unfortunately, many computer science majors are, sort of on edge, because you can actually use large language models to build code right now. And you don't have to go, back into the old days where you had to structure everything, you had to clean the data up, you had to put it in the right format so you can actually train data. So the future is going to be multimodal, and it's going to actually be encompassing many, many different inputs. And I think healthcare is going to be more encompassing of what's happening environmentally to an individual and all the other things that are impacting their health holistically than just the doctor visit and the things that you gain from one doctor visit or hospital visit.
Thank you.
I just want to say, first of all, you truly are a unicorn. Your journey from Brownsville, Brooklyn, surviving Broadway Junction, to surgeon, to captain in the Navy, to professor and innovator is inspiring, and over 20 marathons completed run is unreal. And congratulations on your 2 Ironman. My question is,
Because it's been paid, apparently.
my question is twofold. What moment or experience first convinced you that AI could truly transform patient care? And if you could leave us with one idea from Smarter Healthcare with AI that you hope becomes part of every medical classroom or hospital, what would it be?
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's a great question. I won't say there's one moment. There's been a series of moments that for me were like, wow, this is going to be incredible. But if I had to characterize it, because I'll give it, there are many moments through my time at the J, but I'll give you the moment that will probably be relevant to many of you. And I didn't ask this question, but I should ask it right now to everyone. How many of you are AI optimists? Great. How many of you are AI pessimists? How many of you don't have an opinion? Okay. Well, read my book. And I would say for the optimists, it may temper your optimism. For the pessimists, hopefully it'll raise your optimism. And for those that don't have an opinion, I do believe that after you read the book, you'll have an opinion. But here it is. This is the moment. So at the Jake, in 2019, in the fall of 2019, we were in a room getting a demo. Satya Nadella had come to visit with my boss at the time. It was General Shanahan, and he carries or comes with a cadre of engineers, his own personal engineers. That's pretty cool, like, go around traveling with your own engineers. And they said, we want to meet with the medical team. So it was my team. We were sitting in this room and they're giving us a demo. 2019, fall of 2019, before the pandemic. And there was a platform that they were showing and demonstrating to us called Microsoft Canvas. And they were sitting there and we were sitting in our room and we're just talking about different things. They said, give us a question. Like, a question? Like Google? They're like, wait. So they started typing stuff in and things will come up on the board. I'm like, this is kind of weird. It's very abstract. And then they said, all right, well, let's show you a different application. What they were trying to do is show us this technology and see if there were any medical applications. So the next thing they did is they said, all right, listen, watch this video. Give us some things that you're interested in watching this video. So we're watching a video of like just the marketplace with a lot of activity. So let's say we wanted to find a person, 6 feet, wearing a white hat, whatever, and they just fast forward this thing. And as soon as that person that fit that description come, it would be like a target, and you'd follow and could freeze and frame it. And we're still sort of like, okay. And then we started to say, all right, well, maybe there could be a way for them to use this for the suicide prevention stuff. Maybe there's a way for them to go through all these records. Fast forward, 2023, I'm on the National Academy of Medicine Strategic Planning Committee. Peter Lee is with me in this group. Peter Lee, for those of you who don't know, works for Microsoft. He and I have a conversation because he had just written a book called ChatGPT for Medicine. Now, in 2022, when the beta version for ChatGPT was out, before it was made public, myself and my colleagues were using it. And we were thinking to ourselves, I hope no one else finds out because this is amazing. We thought we had magic in the bottle. So wanting to ask you a question, that was the moment. Because back then in 2022, when we were playing with this and we're putting in prompts and getting answers back, and even though they were wrong, we were just like, this is incredible. And we were writing War and Peace facts in them, not knowing that we were actually helping to train those models. So when Peter Lee and I, in the spring of 23, were having this conversation, this back and forth, I told him what I witnessed in 2019 with his engineers and his boss. And I said, hey, was that the beginning of ChatGPT? Because remember, Microsoft invested $10 billion initially in OpenAI. He said, absolutely right, Hassan, it was. That was a moment for me, Martin, because ever since then I've been using it. And the answers that come from that and the insight that comes from it is amazing. I'm going to leave you with two things. So the second part of your question was like, where should I share with everyone? For those of you that have used OpenAI or ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok or any, how many of you do use those? How many of you have been using it for more than 6 months? How many of you have been using it for more than a year? Okay, good sample. So this conversation that you've been having with these large language models is probably good and ingrained. This is the question I want you all to take back. You can do it if you have it on your phone, or you may not want to, but I would encourage you to ask this question. Ask your model, your favorite one, tell me something about myself that I may not know based on our conversation.
Do you really want them to do that?
Yeah. Do you really want to know? I'm suggesting that you should do that and just see what the answer is. I think you'll be surprised, especially if you've been using it for a while. Tell me something about myself that I don't know based on our conversations. That's one thing I'm going to leave you with. And then the final thing I'll leave you with, which I think is a good place to end. The final chapter of my book is called AI Will Change Everything Except the Things That Matter Most. So we've been talking about AI. And we've been talking about this technology, and we've been talking about the context and the global order of things and our future, not only of America, but society at large and humankind. Where's our place? Is the future going to be carbon-based like we are, or is it going to be silicon-based? Is it going to be a hybrid of that? Many people have been writing all kinds of things about that. But I want you all to leave here with some optimism and a little bit of a understanding and an appreciation for what makes us uniquely human. These models, these incredibly powerful tools were built by us humans. They may surpass our intelligence, believe it or not. They may already be there, depending on who you ask. But I don't think they'd be able to experience the birth of a child and what it means to lose a parent or a best friend or a loved one or have an embrace of a friend you haven't seen in a while or a mentor that has given you something that is intangible because it's changed the trajectory of your life and your family's life and generations from that. And us sitting here right now just sharing this kind of community of intellectual thought and questioning and insight and curiosity, that makes us really incredibly human. And I think right now we should use this as a moment to develop our humanity more than ever and use AI as a tool, but never forget what makes us uniquely human, especially at a time after we've gone through an incredible pandemic that was so isolating. Like, use this moment. Every day of your life is an opportunity to make a connection with someone. Please don't stay hunkered down somewhere. Go out and connect with someone. That makes us human. Because AI is going to change everything except the things that matter most. And the things that matter most are those things that make us human. And thank you, Kenneth. This is like a dream come true. Right? This the one.
Yeah. On behalf of the Harvard College of New York, I want to thank you, Dr. Tetteh, for your work, for your tremendous service, both in uniform for our country and the extension of that service through the work that you're doing to help lead us into the future, to help alleviate suffering, to improve life chances for all of us, everyone, everywhere, as the book says. And this book, Smarter Healthcare with AI, it will definitely change your perspective. There are copies on the back table. Dr. Tetteh will be there as long as he's needed to sign books and to speak with you if you didn't get a chance to ask a question. But I'd like for us all to join in saying thank you for this wonderful talk.